Hi, folks. Welcome. I'm glad to see everybody here. It's such a nice day outside with the sun. And so it's nice to have people here in person. And we also have people online. And those folks that are online, I'd like to remind them to turn off their cameras and mute themselves so that we don't have a bleed into the program and so that everybody can hear what's going on. It's good to see some familiar faces out there in the audience. My name is Mike Barkey. I'm the Executive Director of DCEC. I was a president for a few years, and Steve Etow is now the president, and we have a board. And as the executive director, part of my responsibility is to put on programs periodically, and this is the first one of this year. When we started planning this program back in January, we were involved with listening sessions for the DNR in the Kennard Farms and talking about a program coming up. And we never know with the pandemic what's going to happen. Will be in person, will be virtual, will be a hybrid combination of the two. We've since heard some news about the Kennard Farms expansion, and I'm sure that Lynn and Nancy Utesch will share some of the latest information with us. As far as the content for the program, we have a video, we have a film done by Karen Erbach. It's a 15-minute film called Sold Down the River. It was produced by her, directed by her in 2019. It includes a lot of people in the audience here. It's been shown at, it's a documentary, been shown at quite a few film festivals. It's won awards in a variety of locations from, I think, Beloit to Madison to Oregon and even the Sister Bay Film Festival. So we also had talked at one point about, what was the name of the other movie we were going to show? Right to Harm, yes, thank you. And but that's a long film, and we thought maybe we would benefit most by a question and answer discussion period after this film today. And this is a very good film, and I think it's going to stimulate a lot of conversation, good conversation. So the film, as I mentioned, it's about concentrated animal feeding operations. It's about water contamination. And it's the Wisconsin DNR to a certain extent as well. So you'll see what's in it, and some of you may have already seen it before. Following the film, what we would like to have is a question and answer session, a discussion of the film with Nancy and Lynn Utesch. And you know their background a little bit. Maybe I'll give you some information here. They're from Kewaunee County. They're featured in the film along with some of the others of you. I believe they farm about 150 acres of beef cows. They've been concerned with safe water in Kewaunee County and in Wisconsin, northeastern Wisconsin, for at least a decade or longer. I feel like I came to the whole situation a lot later than most people, but they've been with it since the start. They founded Kewaunee Cares environmental organization. And I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago, they were Door County Environmental Council Environmentalists of the Year in 2015 or 16 or thereabouts. So we're very fortunate to have them here and to help lead in the discussion and question and answer. I think probably in our question and answer, we're going to get a little background information from them. We'll also get some current news. They have some good news to share with us if you've not seen it in the newspaper recently. I hope that they'll talk a little bit about the future, where we're going from here. And we've had some questions and comments over the last few weeks in a variety of ways about biodigesters and manure digesters as well. So that will probably come up. I will tell the folks that are online and want to make a comment and get involved. There's a chat room at the bottom of their screen down there. They can click on that and it'll bring up, and they can put a note in there, a question or whatever. Others will be in there as well. And we have a microphone. If you have questions here, I'll try and make it to whoever it is that has a question or a comment so that you can ask your question and the folks online will be able to hear what you said. In the back of the room, there's also a Door County Environmental Council table. It's got some material, some of our newsletters, membership applications, and so on. So if you get a chance, you might want to take a look at that. And I'd also like to thank Jess Ranke, who's been very nice here at the Crest Pavilion to help us in many of our programs to do the technical aspect of it. And Tony in the back of the room also has provided some audio equipment or other equipment to help us out, so we appreciate that. Of course, Nancy and Lynn being here today, and all of you who came out on a nice day like today to be here. So Without saying anything more, I guess we'll go to the film. It's about 15 minutes. And once the film is over, then we'll get into a question and answer discussion session. So.
This is industry. This is nothing close to farming.
It extracts resources and it generates waste.
No tourist is going to be buying postcards of manure lagoons or wanting to swim in Lake Michigan in the E. coli.
I'm bragging about
soup.
my technical skills here, and now what have I done?
Residents in one Kewaunee County community say the ongoing well contamination problems there have gotten worse.
What we're talking about are third world conditions in America's heartland.
And we are asking the EPA to step in and for DNR to step up.
You can't brush your teeth. You can't cook with it.
This is nothing short of a public health emergency.
Our water issues here are completely undemocratic. The people have not decided that our water quality will be at a point where we can't use it. It was given to us, and it was given to us by a few people that had political influence and money and continue to put money up above the people.
The democracy is not working.
About 100 miles north of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, is a farming and tourist community called Kewaunee County, the gateway to Door County, the Cape Cod of the Midwest. There are 20,000 people living in Kewaunee County. There are 100,000 cows. Most live 24/7 in a large industrial building called a Concentrated Animal Feeding Operation, or CAFO, also known as a factory farm. A CAFO can hold up to 30,000 cows, and their entire short existence is spent indoors. Their feces and urine produce 700 million gallons of liquid waste per year, the equivalent waste of 1 million people. This untreated excrement is stored in huge open lagoons, a cesspool of liquid manure, industrial cleaning chemicals, hormones, and antibiotics. This toxic brew is then collected and spread on fields throughout Kewaunee and neighboring counties. It then seeps from fields into groundwater and private wells. One study found that 60% of wells tested in Kewaunee County contain water unsafe for drinking.
You turn on the water in the faucet and the water comes out dark brown. Manure had been spread on the field next to our home the weekend before. I have a compromised immune system due to stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. That could kill me.
Judge Jeffrey Bolt, at a CAFO permit hearing, said that water in the town of Lincoln is deplorable and that the state of Wisconsin has a massive regulatory failure.
The DNR secretary used to be appointed by a citizen board. It was Alda Leopold in 1920 that convinced our legislature our natural resources should be protected by science, not politics. And once we lost that independent secretary and the secretary was appointed by a governor, things have gone downhill steadily since then.
When you have a governor that appoints the head of the DNR as a person that has no environmental background but is a home builder, it's an indication that they really don't care about the environment. What they want to do is get permits out for any business to be able to do what they want to do.
Their job is, in fact, to be working for the citizens of the state. But today, because of the political governance, oversight of the agency by the governor and the legislature, they really respond to the business interests in the state. Literally, in many of these situations, the rules are written by the business interests themselves. Groups such as the Dairy Business Association has been very open about the fact that they draft the rules governing CAFOs.
Dairy Business Association has been in the forefront of undermining clean water efforts in the state of Wisconsin. The livestock siting law, which they brag that they wrote, made it extremely difficult for local communities and local governments to protect their groundwater.
A lot of people aren't aware that we have a law in Wisconsin called the Livestock Siting Law that basically took away all local control. So local towns, counties, municipalities no longer had anything to say about where factory farms were being put in, how they're operated. We went in as a farm organization. We opposed it. A lot of our members came and testified against it. We're asking, like, well, who's in favor of this? And it ended up being the big dairy lobby, Dairy Business Association, Professional Dairy Producer of Wisconsin, Farm Bureau, the usual, big agribusiness interests.
This is not just environmentalists' issue. This is a sportsman's issue. Between brook trout, steelhead, salmon, I wanted to fish for all these wonderful fish. And that's why I moved here. Now I can't. There are no more naturally reproducing brook trout. The stream actually, Scarborough Creek, is largely dead. They're destroying our recreational resources.
And yet the DNR does nothing to stop this. The people of Kewaunee County felt that it was up to them. They tested the rivers, monitored illegal manure spreading, and documented cases of serious illness caused by contaminated wells. They presented their findings at public DNR hearings, hoping for relief. But none came.
CAFOs in our area and everywhere within the state of Wisconsin are required to have a permit to spread manure. And there are hearings held for that. But I don't go to those hearings any longer because the state legislature has tied the DNR's hands.
You go to a DNR hearing and everybody gets up and talks about the DNR is supposed to be there to protect the environment and how they're not doing it. And the DNR comes back with, we don't have the authority, we have to do what the legislators have allowed us to do.
First of all, the legislators taken away all their money, so they can't do enforcement anyways. They got rid of 250 employees. They lost their best scientists, plus many other people just left because they got so frustrated actually trying to do their job. You have 30% of all the factory farms now are operating with expired permits. I mean, they have actual mission statements and obligations to the states, like to safeguard our natural heritage, to provide consumer protection. All that's been thrown under the bus to grease the skids for factory farms.
Agriculture is essentially unregulated. We hear about all the regulations, but you look at where agriculture is regulated relative to industry, and it's essentially unregulated because the traditional family farming operations did not need regulations, and they still don't need regulations. But industrial agriculture is fundamentally different than the traditional family farms that have been out here.
Well water contamination is increasing. People are getting sick. Yet it appears that elected representatives don't seem to notice.
Our issues have been in the Milwaukee Journal, they've been in the Madison papers, they've been statewide in the papers, they're on the radio, they're on the TV, yet our legislative people continue to deny that anything is really taking place.
Kewaunee County agriculture is the huge majority of the economy down there, so there was just an attitude of maybe looking the other way.
If you don't want big, powerful interests opposing you on particular issues, then you kind of go along with the agenda. In this case, the agenda is set by what I call the agricultural establishment. It includes the big multinational and national agricultural corporations.
Many legislators claim they are concerned about the water issues in Wisconsin, but if you look at their voting records, they continue to support bills that protect polluters and big business.
our representation in local offices, state offices, is pretty much bought out by big industry.
People used to think, oh, it's just Kewaunee County. Not anymore. Now we're finding this problem everywhere where there's CAFOs.
42% of tested wells in southwest Wisconsin were contaminated.
Residents in Juneau and Wood counties learned it was unsafe for them to drink their own water.
It's not the smell of fall Door County likes to talk about, but they're cleaning up a mighty manure mess.
Nitrate levels are rising in drinking water in Rock County.
Of the 72 counties in Wisconsin, 44 have nitrogen levels that exceed standards for health and safety. Rock County exceeds by 28%. In Juneau and Woods counties, citizens filed a class action suit against Central Sands Dairy. They claim they have suffered health problems, including cancer, thyroid disease, miscarriage, and other issues because of farming practices that the farm knew were harmful.
My water is contaminated, and I didn't know it. And we've been drinking it all these years.
We've sort of got a free-for-all, don't we? We've got a come here, dump anything you want, use whatever you want. You know, it's a limited resource, and it's an extremely valuable resource. Once it's contaminated, it's contaminated.
It's not just water contamination that people should worry about with the rapid expansion of CAFOs.
You go to some parts of the state and there's like ghost towns now. Why is this community boarded up? What happened? Well, you find out eventually that all the little farms went out of business and they're no longer sending their kids to school. They're no longer buying anything at the local hardware store. There's one giant CAFO set up. That guy's not buying anything locally. He's buying stuff from Chicago. It's coming in on a big truck. So all that money's leaving the community. He's bringing outside workers, not even hiring local people anymore. That's going to destroy rural Wisconsin. And we're going to be left with a land of 10,000 lagoons.
The suicides don't get in the news. The bankruptcies don't get in the news. The politicians throw rural America and actual family farms under the bus.
The person that's supposed to be the boss of the legislature is the people. Unfortunately, they're not listening to their boss.
It's time to make a change. Farming has to change. What you have been doing is not working. Look, you can't put 40, 50 tons of liquid manure on 2 to 3 or 4 feet. You can't do that. Gravity wins.
When you go to Mexico, you're told not to drink the water because we all know it's bad. When you come as a tourist to Kewaunee County, Door County, Calumet County, any of the counties where manure is spread, you might get sick. You don't know if that water is clean and clear, it can still be contaminated.
I'm really worried if things don't change, if we have the same kind of political management of the agency and being driven by economic forces, that our resources are going to go downhill.
If the DNR and EPA continue on the path that they are of a really lack of regulation and lack of enforcement, northern Wisconsin is going to be a completely different landscape. This will not be the thriving, enjoyable tourist destination that everybody believed Wisconsin to be. It will be a dead zone, and that's really what this is working out to be, is a dead zone and a sacrifice zone. We, the citizens, are not willing to allow that to happen. We are not to be sacrificed.
Okay. So there's one question that did come in. Okay.
Really powerful film, visually, content-wise, and just really a lot of good things to talk about, I guess, that are not so good things, but plenty of things to talk about. So I'd like to bring Lynn and Nancy up, and maybe there are some others. We have some questions that have come in from online. Also, I'll bring the microphone around if you have some questions or comments. I'm hoping that Lynn and Nancy can again update us on some things, maybe look towards the future and answer some questions that perhaps others have questions about but don't know the answers yet. So.
That's it. Don, you want to come on? Then I might have you actually. Folks online. Forward a little bit, sorry. Yeah, come forward. Yep, like right. Okay.
We'll eventually get it for you.
Right, right.
Right behind you there. Oh. Welcome, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed the movie today. So that's it was made a few years ago. So if you see a few things that were a little dated, you know, but unfortunately everything still applies. So that's you know, a lot of what you saw is still currently occurring in Kewaunee County and throughout the state of Wisconsin, actually nationally. So hopefully everything that you saw, you could take home and understand that it's still occurring today. That's this is a group of, obviously, if you were watching the movie, that participants in the movie that were actually part of our documentation and gave commentary throughout this film. That's we also have Jody Perrins here, who is from the town of Lincoln. That's it's been so long since I've talked in front of people, I can't remember it. The town of Lincoln, where the Kennard case has had a turn for the better. That's so maybe we should maybe take a few questions about the movie and then we'll go into the Kennards. And how about we do that? Any questions as to what's taking place, or what's your comments from the movie? Well, I guess maybe we'll go to the Kennard part. Jody, you want to speak a little bit about what has actually taken place? It's Jody Perrins.
I'll try not to be emotional about this, but there's 3 people who, 2 of them you saw in the film, who are no longer with us. The little girl and her pony, she's a junior in high school. So these people have been fighting this fight before I joined it. I'm a mouthpiece. It was 2013 when we first challenged the DNR for the egregious permit of putting 8,000 animals on an area where there was less than 10 feet to bedrock. We know that looking out here, we know what bedrock looks like in Door County, right? And there were a half a dozen very courageous townspeople who went up against the Kennard family farms, who were neighbors to them. And they said, this isn't right. And they were dragged through the mud. And at that trial, the people put up a fight. And we had a fabulous judge who listened to almost 3 hours of public testimony from people like Dave Mindock, who is now dead, who could not drink his water, who had severe digestive problems because of it. We had somebody from the Dairy Business Association, and this is firmly burned in my mind, who said, I don't know what you all are complaining about. Have you ever lived in third world countries? And this gentleman, who I did not know at the time, stood up and yelled from the back of the room, yes, I have. You remember that? And this is worse than anything I've ever come from because it is egregious neglect. 9 years ago, that was. And just this past Friday, finally, we had an answer. And the DNR finally listened to us. And it's because of the tenacity of the people in Kewaunee Cares, of Lynn and Nancy, who have put their lives on hold, Bill Iwan, who is now passed, Joe Musial, who is now passed, who had the guts to stand up and say, this is your job, DNR, do it. When is enough enough? When does the profits of a company overtake the life of the families who live around you? And we have people like Robert and Christine who are fighting the same fight. So the answer to Steve's question about where do we go from here? The DNR board right now still has Scott Walker people appointed. And we all know, we all read the newspapers, we know that they are being obstructionists. Okay? Preston Cole is who is now the head of the DNR, is an appointed position. If we do not hold the State House, if we do not have a governor in there, this is all going to be for naught. Where do we go from here? We need to keep electing our officials who feel the same way that we feel about our land and our water, our right to our properties, as much as their right to harm. I'll shut up.
I'd like to add that, so the Kennards, this whole case has actually taken, well, like a decade to go through to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court last year, or actually this year, said that the DNR has the authority to regulate based on water quality. That's unfortunately, Kennard Farms chose to, they were supposed to set a herd cap. So that means their maximum number of animals that they could have on their facility. They chose to have an animal cap of 21,500 animal units. That's what they thought was being good neighbors and something that would be sustainable and good for the water quality in Kewaunee County. Luckily, the DNR listened to the people, not just these people here, but everybody from across the state of Wisconsin. And actually, we were lucky that we had national organizations that came and presented science and information that that counteracted what the Kennard Farms was saying. And the DNR gave an animal cap of 8,000 animal units, or 11,000 animal units, which equals to 8,000, basically 8,000 dairy cows. So they have to stay at the number that they are today. That's a huge win. That is unbelievable.
Which a huge win is an area that's suffering from mass contamination. And we're sitting up here today telling you what a huge win we have when many residents in the town of Lincoln can't use their water. And you know, if you have an open wound and you live with water contamination, there's a really good chance that you could get sick from taking a shower or bath or whatever. I mean, that's a very true reality. We don't have those kinds of numbers that say that, because people maybe don't go to the doctor and they're dealing with it, or they go and the doctor's not realizing that, oh, look, you may have MRSA because you've bathed with water that's contaminated. So why we're sitting up here today, and of course, I mean, we don't get me wrong, we are very happy that the DNR said no to this permit, but what are we saying no to? And really, where have we arrived when a number like 21,500 animal units in an area where you're talking about people directly impacted, infants in intensive care, where are we as human beings? Okay, I think that's the question that we have to get back to. And the other thing I was thinking about today driving up here is, you know, most of us have dogs that we love, and we're really opposed to things like puppy mills. And the fact of the matter is we don't ever really talk about animal welfare, because that's a whole nother thing. But you know what, if you're not being mindful about what's arriving at your supper table, and the idea that you're consuming an animal that has spent its entire life in confinement, you might think about what you're ingesting, because I'm of the belief that that becomes part of who you are. It's part of your diet. And we need to start thinking about those kinds of things. And I guess that brings us to the grocery store and the kinds of purchases we make. We need to be mindful about that.
Just thinking about where we go from here, right? You know, usually when we have gatherings like this, not to say that we're getting old, but when you look around, right? And so much of this happened because of local grassroots commitment to working for a cause, and especially the folks sitting around me here. So we really need to keep that going, and hopefully get more young folks involved. And I don't know how we do that, whether we get it through the ag programs at school, but we certainly need people out in the communities talking to folks and visiting schools and trying to bring greater awareness, because you know, unfortunately, a couple of the folks that were really actually 3 people that were critical, and Bill Iowa and Joe Musial and Jerry, Jerry Pellet have all, they've all passed. And you know, they were incredible minds and communicators and got the message out. And so we need people to step up and take their place and help out. And the other end of it is, obviously, this is very political also. And as Jody, you know, if we wouldn't have elected Evers as governor, Josh Call as attorney general, you know, I don't think this decision on Kennard Farms would have been the way it came out. And so it's important that we remember that when we talk about going to the polls, and what's important to protect our way of life here.
Can I have to say something? Because if you're watching, everybody saw Joel Kitchen say, you know, we just kind of look the other way, because this is big money in Kewaunee County. Big money, big manure, big contamination. So you know what? Hey, I don't think that Joel's done a great job on this issue. And I know that there's been a lot of people that have done a lot of work. And then all of a sudden we're hearing that Joel's running with the ball and is sticking the feather in his cap, that he did all this work. But I do want to make it clear that if I would say anything about the whole issue, it's that community has been the game changer here. And you know what? People who showed up. And, you know, people always say, what can I do? What can I do? The first thing is you need to show up.
I just want to add what Nancy said there, is that in 2015, we were, a lot of us were very active, showing up at every land and water meeting, and, you know, just to be there. And I think it was like in August, and the DNR showed up And this was after the petitioners had filed the EPA Safe Water Drinking Act complaint. And the DNR showed up and they said, you know, we're here to do something about it, and we're going to put together this work group. And we said, who are you going to put on this work group? A bunch of agency people? A bunch of industry people? And after the meeting, the DNR guy, Russ, came up and he said, well, who should we put on the meeting? Who should we put on the group? And we gave him Dick's name and Lynn's name and my name and Mick's name, who we saw there, who's a great scientific genius. These are the people you need to put on. So the takeaway is show up at the meetings, take the opportunities to sit on these boards, because you don't know, we were talking earlier about things dripping. You don't know when it's going to pay off. It might need 9 years, but it's going to pay off. But you have to just be there, ready for the opportunity. And if somebody asks you if you want to be on a board, in a work group, something, take that chance, because you never know when it's going to turn up.
There is a question that came in online when you're done.
It's okay. What was the other question? There are a lot of things I could say, but for this audience, I'm not, I see some familiar faces, but I see a lot of new faces for me. So I don't know how much you say, you know. So when I make comments about this, and it's pretty emotional for me, but when I make comments about this, please, if you already know what I'm saying, just write it off too. I don't know who you are. But there's a problem of scale in this conversation from my perspective right now, and that is that we're talking about Kinnard, one farm, where we have one win after 9 years. 9 years ago, a family in Kewaunee County chose to go against everything pretty much that we believe in Kewaunee County about our friends and neighbors. Don't rock the boat. Don't accuse your neighbors of doing bad things. And certainly don't charge them with some heinous act. I mean, that goes against our nature. We're neighbors, we're friends. We've known each other for a long time. I'm an immigrant. I only bought my farm in 1996. I'm an outsider. But most of the people in our county grew up there, and their parents grew up there, and their grandparents grew up there. Many of them are married to people who are from the area, and they've come back to retire in the area. And it took us 9 years to deal with one farm, one CAFO in little bitty Kewaunee County with only 20,000 people. We have 17, and I'm told now going on 18 CAFOs. It took us 9 years to deal with one. So there's a problem of scale here. We have to scale up the effort. Politics, money, people, those are and the law, those four things, I think, may give us a way to organize our thoughts about where to go from here. To my mind, two things have made a difference in changing things slightly. One, a family stood up and said enough, and were brave enough to take on their neighbors and say, this is not okay. And it took them 9 years to get some resolution to the problem. 9 years. As residents of this area, I would urge you, if you're not already, to become very, very much aware of what's going on near you and talk to your neighbors. Talk to the farmer in your area. Because the other thing that I've seen change since 1996 is that some agricultural practices are changing at a glacial pace, but they are changing with some of the farms, on some of the land, on some of those farms. But change is happening, and I would submit to you and everybody in this room that that change is coming about because the community has been going to meetings and asking questions. Sometimes just being in the room is enough to exert some pressure on some people. So participation of the community, I think, of those 4 items is key. We need to use the law, but the law is extremely slow. Politics is incredibly important. Who gets elected in the county board election in Door County and Kewaunee County next month is very important. Who gets elected in November of this year is very important. We can use the law, but we have to have politicians who don't write laws against us, which is what they have done over the last 20 years, because money has paid them to write laws that favor money.
I'll make this quick. Yeah, we've been waiting 9 years for this to come down. During that 9 years, people on this committee sitting here attended meeting after meeting in Madison, in Dubuque. We went all the way down to Dubuque once. We've been everywhere and spoke and asked questions. And I want everybody to remember, we will never solve any problem without somebody asking the first question. We started 9 years ago. This isn't over. We have 16, 17 more permits that are going to come up for renewal, expansions. We were lucky enough doing the work groups that we were all in. We actually got the state to change the rules on manure spreading, and our natural resource board NR 151 was changed because we went and asked and made that happen. So it can be done. We're not over. We're not giving up. And like I always end up, it's not the cow's fault. The cows are doing nothing wrong. I believe the problem is with their owners. Thank you.
So we have a question that came in online. It's actually kind of a 3-part question. Does Filtrix, I think I'm pronouncing it right, barriers, basically a sock, help in any way that can remove contaminants, stop before it goes into water?
I will start. I think they're talking about coming out of tile lines. That's, well, filtration in any sense. No, that's, you could, like on the, there is such a thing as a tile line filtration system. One, you have to realize most tile lines in Northeast Wisconsin here are put in wrong. They're supposed to actually be terminated and have laterals 100 feet back from any waterway. Most tile lines in our area are actually go directly into a waterway or a ditch line. So, you know, that's the first problem that we have. And there are hundreds and, well, I'd say thousands of tile lines right now. So those filters that go on a tile line, there's actually one of the farms in our area, Kennard Farms, has one, I believe unfortunately it's one, you know. If you have thousands and thousands of tile lines and you put in one, you're doing nothing. That's That's, that's a joke. And unfortunately, that's what happens with a lot of these practices that are being put out in the media is, they might do something on one field and then they claim that they're doing it everywhere. Unfortunately, that's not the truth. So that's one of our biggest issues that we have is there's a lot of PR out there, like filtration systems, digesters, which we will cover. That was asked by Mike to digesters is another one. Cover crops, cover crops. If you put in seed in November and December, that's not a cover crop. Cover crop, that's a PR move. It's not, and unfortunately, taxpayers are paying for all these things. And the real filtration is the soil itself under proper management. So we have regenerative agriculture. We know how to farm correctly. It's just not this model that we're talking about. So that's, anybody else want to get a quick on the filtration thing? That's
right now in the state of Wisconsin, a manure spreader can come within 15 feet. That's from me to back row. 15 feet from a wetland and spread manure. Now, you do not have to be a hydrologist or an engineer to imagine that 15 feet is higher than the wetland. And I'm telling you, gravity wins. They do it every day because they can. They have so much manure and so much water, they have to get rid of it. And they put it on as thick as they can. And that is our problem. How do we stop that? Well, we're trying.
So there's another part to this question. What has the lowest greenhouse emissions, composting or a methane digester? Sorry, you mentioned digester, and so
composting. One, you have to realize a digester. So it's it's not actually a manure digester. It's a methane digester. What goes into a digester comes out of a digester. And then, and it's land spread. All of those nutrients are still coming back out, okay? As far as greenhouse gas emissions, your biggest problem though with greenhouse gas emissions is it starts out with, so in order to create that methane, well, so cows do fart and they do have methane just like all the rest of us do. But the majority of that methane is because of the manure storage, how that manure is managed. And that's under anaerobic conditions. That anaerobic conditions is what creates methane. Poop coming out of a cow, falling onto a green pasture has very, very, very little methane because it's aerobic with oxygen. That is nature's system. That's the perfect system, is to do it that way because that's the way nature intended it. Nature had this all figured out long before we started farming. The digester, and it's made to create additional methane. So it's not coming out of the cow. It's already in an anaerobic state. It comes out of the cow, goes through the digester, and they actually have to incorporate more bacteria in there, anaerobic bacteria, to make more methane. And it's a very leaky system. So you end up with more methane. Now you're putting it into a manure pit, another anaerobic system where then you are creating additional methane. So you're now venting off of that manure pit more methane. That in itself is, you're causing more greenhouse gas emissions. The methane is just one of the issues. I mean, you also have hydrogen sulfide, you have ammonias. So you've got a lot of other things that take place under anaerobic conditions in those manure pits and in that system. With composting, you do get some methane. There always is. It doesn't matter if it's human or whatever, but it's very, very low because composting is a aerobic process. So you are having oxygen put into that manure and you're making it so that it actually, those microorganisms, the ones that work in composting, are the good guys and they create less methane. So, and very simple, that's how it worked. But and the whole system is, from a greenhouse gas emission perspective, confinement systems, the whole system uses carbon, carbon sources. You have to bring the feed to the cow. You have to take the manure away from the cow. You have to take the manure from the manure pit out to the fields. That's all burning fossil fuels, creating additional issues. So that system, digesters, is not a good system at all, period.
Final part of this question, the 3-part, and then we'll pass off to someone in the room. Which uses more energy or effort to create? Biomass, composting, or a digester? What uses more energy or effort to create of these 3? Biomass, composting, or a digester?
Digester, period.
Okay.
For what Lynn just said, for years, for hundreds of years, all of our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents composting. We had as many cows. We hear this all the time. There's just as many cows in Kewaunee County or in Door County as there ever has been. We're not adding cows. No, but you're concentrating them. Because when our grandparents, my grandparents were right up the road here on my German side, my Belgian side's from Kewaunee County. Their cows, 40 cows, kept my family fed, was out on pasture, making cow pies. By far, the least impact for as far as energy consumption goes. I want to give you a real life, because I think so many times we get lost in the statistics and in the science of this. I sat on the Lincoln Town Plan Commission for 8 years. Kennard Farms came to us with this great idea for this digester. Actually, it was Detroit Energy that came to us to digest Kennard's manure. They came to the first meeting and they said, we're going to put this digester in. It's going to remove all of the odor, blah, 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 going to reduce odor. I wasn't at the first meeting. I came to the second meeting and I said, that's wonderful. Put it in the contract. Crickets. This is all hype. All of this stuff with digesters is hype. There's not sufficient enough evidence to be able to back up the claims. They haven't been around enough to be able to show you exactly what's going to happen. Early on, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, it was proven that actually the smells, the odor coming out of digesters was worse. Okay, so right now everybody's keen on all of this digester stuff, and it's just that. It's just, we're trying to do something for California that blows my mind. I can't understand it. But the reality of it is that if they come to your town board, which is exactly where you should start getting involved, is start asking them to put it into the contracts, put it into the conditional use permit, put it into the livestock or their livestock siting permit. That's where it's really going to matter.
Just a little more on digesters. Our good friend Tom Cretney is not here, who is the expert on digesters, an engineer friend. But when you look at the manure, the good volatile organic carbon in the manure that the bugs use in aerobic breakdown out in your field is stripped away in the digester to produce the methane. So you take the best volatile organic carbons out of the manure and turn it into nasty old methane gas. Now, the industry has done an awesome job of promoting this stuff as renewable natural gas. Digesters produce renewable natural gas, and they get away with that because companies are looking to buy carbon credits, and so they'll spend multiple times what that methane gas is worth, 10, 20, 30 times what the methane gas is worth out of a digester to get carbon credits for renewable natural gas when there is nothing renewable or natural about that process. A digester is a mechanical device that takes an incredible amount of maintenance and work to make it run. When you look at the city of Green Bay, they put in 2 digesters for a population of 200,000 people, $168 million for the digesters at NEW Water to take care of 200,000 people. We got 100,000 cows in Kewaunee County. That's like 2 million people. How many hundreds of millions of dollars would it take to build a digester to actually do something that would perform on the standard of what Green Bay NEW Water does?
Speaking of numbers, yeah, we do have 100,000 cows, and that is 2 million people. Everybody's seen this in the paper, this big digester program they're talking about. You know, it was in Door County, it's in our stars. They're building this digester complex a little south of town here in, said Greenlee. Okay, so they're building this thing down there, and it says it's going to handle 360 million tons of manure a year. 360 million tons a year. Now, a semi, one tanker is about 24 tons, 5,500 gallons, okay? This little complex that they're building is going to have 1,500,000 trucks a year coming into it. That's 41,000 trucks a day to bring the manure to them. Now, how did they do the math? Where did they get this? How are they going to move the manure? This is what's happening in Kewaunee County. We're almost 4 million tons just from a few of our farms. And you know, we have the same problem you do, shallow soils, high water tables. This is not ending well for us. So get out there and get involved as fast as you can, guys. Because once it's gone, what is the property value? What do you have left? Thanks.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. I was doing a little research on digesters compared to composting. And I thought it very striking that for the best efficiency of a digester is at about 106 degrees Fahrenheit. And that if you were to measure the heat inside of a composting pile, you would find temperatures ranging up into maybe 160 degrees or higher, which is enough to kill pathogens that are in the manure. Have pathogens, thank you, pathogens that would not die at 106 degrees. So really, when they're putting all this into the digesters, they're really not solving any of the problems that we have as far as producing something that is going to be worthwhile to anyone. Whereas in composting, you end up with a product at the end that is valuable, useful to be applied to the fields. And why we're not spending money on maybe, you know, trucking manure to a site where they can be, you know, in large quantities composted, instead of talking about pipelines and all sorts of things to major digesters. Also, I had an opportunity to ask Representative Kitchens about his NR 151 part. And I said, well, it's all great that we have all these rules now to when we can spread, how much we can spread, what the soils are, and that is limitations, all to be on the honor system with no teeth in it at all. And I asked him, I said, how are we going to keep this, make sure it's happening. And said, well, that's going to have to be your problem. And I'm thinking, as a group of people, we are the ones that have to come up either with the energy or the money to regulate these policies that have been passed. And I don't see a movement that maybe, where do we get the money, or do we get volunteers, or how do we go about maybe watching, a watchdog all the time when it's coming to spreading. I see just in this last warm up, a lot of trucks going by that are, I don't know, isn't it April 15th that you can start spreading? I think I've seen it happening a lot sooner than that with this warm up we just had. We know it's coming up here to Door County because
And I just want to respond real quick to you, Paul, because actually self-policing works. So what I mean by that is if you're a neighbor to a field getting spread and you're like, wow, trucks have been here since 6 this morning. It's 9 p.m. I've been counting some. I quit after it was 40. Go out and look. I would encourage you to take photographs. I would encourage you to see how that manure looks after it's spread. If you think that it looks like an over application, there's a DNR hotline. You do not need to identify yourself. You know what, even if you just have a warden come out and look and maybe everything was fine, but maybe your intuitive self told you, this is wrong. I know that they shouldn't be out here until midnight, and they've been here since, the sun came up. And that helps because these operators, when they know someone's watching, it does have the tendency to amend behaviors for the better. So it is important to keep an eye out. And I just want to add one more thing, Paul, too, because you're talking about composting. When you have waste, and manure is what we're talking about, in a more solid state, our problem here is we're on the Niagara Escarpment, which means we're on rock, right? And we're on porous rock. And this liquid manure does not work for us on our landscape. So that's one thing we really need to be thinking about, is this liquid state of manure, the fact that we have these huge pits and that we're spreading this. In 2004, we've been saying 9 years. When the family was poisoned out in the most contaminated region, it was 2004 that the whole family was poisoned. Their 8-month-old daughter, Samantha, was in intensive care. Super nice family, living their dream. They were in a century farmhouse that was their family. This story breaks my heart because you know what? That was the beginning for this family of what became a very hard time. Their daughter just reached 18 years of age a few years back. And, imagine having a child where you're questioning how damaged they may be from being in intensive care because they were poisoned as an 8-month-old infant. And on that note, that same scenario played out in Door County in 2014, same deal. Baby bottle that was poisoned from E. coli, liquid spreading in a karst region that poisoned a family, killed the family dog. And these are the things we have to think about. It's not okay. This is an issue about ethics and morals and commonwealth and loving your neighbor and taking care of your community and saying that, shit in water is not acceptable, period.
I would like to address a couple of the points that you, can I just real quick, Paul, so the NR 151, the Environmental Working Group has come out with a report showing that in Kewaunee County, that we have over applied the nitrogen and phosphorus by over 100%. That's so nutrient management plans are designed to maximize the yield and profit of the farmer. They are not designed for water quality, period. We have universities that are saying it's a gold standard for water quality. It does not protect the water quality. It never did. It was never intended to, and it never will. You know, when you can apply 26,000 gallons per acre of liquid manure, and that's a very common amount, there's absolutely no way that's not ending up in your groundwater. I've seen in nutrient management plans submitted to the DNR up to 32,000 gallons per acre. Per acre. And guess what? That was in Door County. So nutrient management plans are not the answer. They're designed, the guys that designed it to make it so that they could do waste disposal and make it so that we thought that they were doing something right. So nutrient management plans don't work. On the digester and the composting issue, as far as pathogens, the Mark Borkhardt that did a lot of the water studies, him and Becky Larsons from UW-Madison did studies on digesters back way too long now. A digester can reduce pathogens by 0% up to 999%. The problem is, even at 99.9%, it's not low enough to make it safe. Because the volume of pathogens going into that digester, still coming out, are so high that it's still not safe. And the one problem with all these digester studies is they test at the outlet of the digester. So even if you've eliminated 99.9% of those pathogens, now you're going to put it into a manure pit where it's going to sit there for 6 months. Guess what? You've got the perfect feedstuffs in that pit to make that pathogens grow again. So what do you end up when you go to spread it on the field? The exact same thing you started with. And Krasimira Historova, hopefully I pronounced that somewhere close to right. Microbiology professor from Marquette University that's done a lot of research in Kewaunee County. She has said the temperatures that the digesters operate is the perfect temperature for pathogens to grow. They are not designed to kill pathogens, and they will not kill them all off, because it is a perfect temperature for them to grow. And that was stated at a DNR work group for advanced and new technologies. That's as they were trying to say that we needed more digesters. There's another question.
You were talking about nutrient management plans just recently. I just wanted to mention that if anyone here rents land to farmers, they need to supply a nutrient management plan to the DNR, whether it's looked after or not, that's another issue. But the Door County Soil and Water does have a land lease agreement for farmers, for people that rent land to farmers, and you can put in that agreement what you want them to do and not do. And we do that ourselves, and other people, I don't know if they've done it or not, but that may help that issue altogether. But that's not why I was going to ask a question. It sounds to me like most of the issues that we're all concerned with here are from CAFOs. So the question is, what is being done with our legislatures, whether it's Kitchens or Jock or whoever? Is there any upcoming legislation or proposals that have a chance of moving anywhere, or is this, we just have to wait now until the administration changes or some such thing?
We sound very political up here. We don't actually mean to sound that way, but unfortunately with our Republican legislature, we've all been down there. We've talked to them over and over again. I mean, Joel Kitchens lives in denial of what's going on in Kewaunee County and Door County. And you can tell them that. I said that. But it's, same thing with right now, they had listening sessions for clean water. The legislature did, task force. What did they do? All over the state. What did they do? Absolutely nothing. Not one proposal came out of there. At this point in time, there is really nothing that is being proposed, and they're hoping that we all go away. So that's.
I mean, I know there are new rules that farms have to live with in terms of setbacks from sinkholes and waterways and that sort of thing. Is that moving? Are more things coming in that regard, or and is that being enforced at all by anybody in the DNR, or is that really a problem in itself?
No, in fact, talking about the task force, I mean, it was really so discouraging, because one of the number one issues that came up over and over, and this is statewide, right? You have people driving multiple hours to, give their 3 cents, or 3 minutes. Yeah, 3 minutes, not the 2 cents for 3 minutes. And nothing came out of that. And, even really good people serving in the legislature, it's like, and I'm just going to say Katrina Shankland, who I happen to like a lot. It's like, Katrina, come on. You heard so much about CAFOs and the kinds of problems they were causing in our communities. And yet when that final report came forth, the CAFO issues were basically ignored. And I'll tell you another thing, 3 years ago now, citizens, again, all over the state, traveling multiple hours. I traveled to Madison and back, talking to Dad Cap. And what the commentary was on was, okay, Dad Cap wants to hear what you want to talk about what do we need to change. And citizens all over the state came, and we were talking about toxic emissions and get bonding for these complexes. So when they go bankrupt, we as the neighbors aren't paying for that cleanup and everything. Multiple good commentary. And you know what? It became a political circus. And Dad Cap took all this great commentary from all around the state. And you know what? It's still up on a high shelf. And those are the kinds of things that they are discouraging. And I think if I would say two words that start with the letter A. One, we still have this problem because there is an action. Okay. Second thing, if citizens all over the state are coming and making commentary, my God, have the accountability to respond. We're not driving all over the state, leaving our families, getting babysitters, getting off work so that we can give commentary for you to make a political circus and then put it up on a high shelf, because you know what? It's not really what you wanted to hear.
Now, let me ask you, let me put you on the spot now.
Sure.
Because I haven't read the article. It was recently in I think it was the Pulse, about the people running for the board.
Sure.
And the questions and their answer to that. I haven't read that yet, but I was going to read it. And the question I have is, any one of those people ones that are sensitive to this issue, or not? Does one stand out or not, or don't you know?
There is one that would stand out in my mind, and that would be Lori Jorgensen, and she's in Forestville. She's very involved with these issues, so she's the one that comes to mind. Maybe
down in Brown County, if anybody has family down there, Amanda Chu is another person who I would support.
I didn't read these questions at all, or the answers, but I don't even know if any of them dealt with water issues at all. Maybe not at all.
They probably ignored them.
If this were an urban area, touching the water issue is touching on, in an urban place, what's called the third rail. In the case of us who live out in the countryside, it's grabbing a hold of the electric fence. I looked at, even Laura Jorgensen does not mention the water issue in her presentation. And the reason for that is that the community is very divided over this, not surprisingly. And in fact, that was something I wanted to comment on, if I could briefly. And that is that I live sort of with one foot in each world here, because I care very much about the environment. And as I stated in the little film clip that we watched, I actually moved here because of the natural environment, the natural resources, the streams. the fishing. How many people in here like birds, wild birds? Okay. How many people like to fish? See, a lot more bird people than fish people. I like that. Okay, right. Okay, I got bird people and fish people. Let me think. How many people like deer? Like to hunt? How about ducks? How many got duck people? Not so many ducks. Yeah, no, fewer than the fishing people. It's interesting. I came up here because of all of those things. And I also love horses, and I raised horses for quite a few years. I came up here because of the natural environment, because of the fact that we have steelhead that go up the creeks, and in fact, probably are today. And I'm sitting here. What happens to a stream? Whether it's the Kewaunee River or it's, what is it, Hibbert's Creek? What happens to that stream when agricultural pollutants get into it? It dies, in short. But why does it die? It dies because it gets all this additional fertilizer in it. It grows a bunch of algae. The algae grows wild. It covers the bottom. And then it dies, and it consumes oxygen, and the oxygen level in the stream drops. You get a situation like in Forestville Dam, where there's so much turbidity, which is a fancy way to say mud in the water, that the sunlight can't get down and the plants can't grow. And if the plants can't grow, you don't get reoxygenation of the water and the fish die. Well, we know that fish live, or used to, till they drained all the water out of it, behind the Forestville Dam. They just didn't grow as well as they could have. They didn't live in the numbers that they could have if that water had been free of the contaminants that were in it. So it dies. But what else dies? Do we know what a macroinvertebrate is? We have a biologist in the back. Bugs. Let's talk about bugs. Bugs are necessary. Bugs consume organic matter, but bugs also feed your birds. So what happens around a stream where there are no bugs? There are no birds. If there are no bugs, there's nothing for most of the fish to eat, because they eat fish or eat other fish that eat bugs. No fish, no birds, no tourists, no economy. I mean, these things have huge consequences. So when we have this question of where do we go from here, one of the things that we need to do, I think, is to help people understand that all these things are connected. And when we poison our streams, when we turn the streams and rivers of Door County and Kewaunee County into open agricultural sewers, that's what they've become. So bad that Dr. Hristova, who was mentioned, was asked in a public meeting several years ago whether she would allow her children to swim in the Kewaunee or the Anape rivers. And she said, absolutely not, because of the bacteria and the viruses that were in the water, including, anybody here remember when all those folks died down in Milwaukee from water pollution? Anybody remember what the bug was that was involved? Cryptosporidium. There is cryptosporidium verified by the water tests that were done by Dr. Hristova in the Kewaunee River. Do you want your kids to swim in that? Now, it may be that it's not so present at such a level that somebody actually would contract it. Because again, virus load, bacteria load, those are issues. But what can we do? We can communicate to people that we're destroying the very environment that we depend on. We are killing it. And that's not okay. And since they didn't pass this down to me, I'm going to say a couple other things. So just hang on, folks. NR 151 How deep does soil have to be in order to eliminate enough of the agricultural pollutants to be judged as not polluted? How much soil does that take? How much do you think it takes? And what does NR 151, the supposed regulatory change, allow in terms of the minimum depth of soil before you can start pouring manure onto it? 2 feet. So if I were to say to you that NR 151, which Mr. Kitchens will stand up and say, wow, this is great. We have these new regulations that allows a farmer to spread manure on 2 feet of soil, when we know, based on Dr. Borchert's work, that it requires 50 feet to strain the pollutants out. What good did NR 151 do for us? I would submit it's another PR job. Okay.
Could you
Last-
introduce yourself really quickly? We've got some requests online for you to
Okay.
introduce yourself.
I will finish up.
No, introduce yourself. People
Oh,
want to know
introduce
your
myself.
name. Yes.
Okay,
Or
I'm
just
on a roll.
your name is.
My name is John Ribsky. I bought a farm in Kewaunee County, a small farm, 103 acres, 1996. I still live there. And I do live with 1 foot in the farming community and 1 foot in the environmental community. Seems like I spend more time in the environmental community of late. But I would like to say something about community. Community includes all of the people who are engaged in agriculture in our counties. Community, and those people are not going to change unless they feel that they're part of, and we feel good about them as neighbors if they do the right thing. If we ostracize them, if we get angry at them, if we call them names, we really don't build the community that needs to change. We become adversaries. And this sometimes gets me in trouble with my environmental friends. But I would argue that we need to become friends with the people who are doing agriculture. We need to talk to them. We need to come to understand what they're doing. The farmers did not invent CAFOs. University agriculturalists and the people who build machinery and make profit off of farmers came up with the CAFO system. Farmers do not go out in the morning and say, my goal today is to pollute your drinking water. They don't do that, but they have very selective memories and they have a very selective understanding. If somebody walks up to you and tells you what your dad did, what your grandfather did, and what you're doing is polluting the water that everybody is trying to drink, well, the tendency is to deny that your grandfather was a bad person, that your father was a bad person, and oh my God, that you're a bad person. That's what they do. Farmers go out in the morning trying to grow a crop, raise some animals, sell some milk, make a profit. Those are the first things they're thinking about, not whether there's a strange virus that they can't even pronounce in the groundwater. And they're doing what the DNR and the Department of Agriculture and the University of Wisconsin and the manufacturers have told them to do to make a profit. So I would argue maybe the biggest thing we could do from here is start building bridges to the agricultural community and not demonize them. But that's my opinion. Thank you.
We do have some people online that are asking lots of questions. So I want to just slide one in here if that's okay. First off, is the film available to share? Because they'd like to send a link to some other interested people.
Well, it's on
It's on
Vimeo.
Vimeo.
Right? So you just
Yeah.
If you go online,
Can you put the link on the chat?
Yep. Yeah, I can put the link there.
Aren't we getting all good with this stuff? A
Right,
link on the
right.
chat.
Okay, just a couple more. What are the spreading restrictions around sinkholes?
You know specifically what it is?
It was at 75 feet. I'm not sure exactly what it is, and depends on which part of the state you're from as well. So that's, what we have here in Northeast Wisconsin is not the same as what it is in other areas. And in my opinion, there should be, and actually for those of us that were on the work groups that they based NR 151 modifications off of, we said that there should be no spreading in any closed depressions, which would be what would feed to that sinkhole. So most of the recommendations that were made by the citizens and the small farmers on those work groups were not adapted at all. Actually, the modifications to NR 151 that were made, the DBA actually presented that in their first meeting, and that's exactly what the DNR adapted, was exactly what they proposed, what the DBA did. And actually, there was a question earlier about what else is being done. At the same time that NR 151 was supposed to have been opened up for modification, NR 243 was, which is the CAFO regulations, that was supposed to have been opened up at the same time. And we have heard nothing since then. And there has been no talk about it because nobody wants to open that one. That's NR 243.
The only thing I want to say on that and the question about this is that when there was a clip in the documentary about the fact that there was a bunch of overdue CAFO permits, right? That they had not been reapplied. And as I think back on this now, we watched that happen, and that these were all delinquent permits. And then all of a sudden, in I think it was like June of that year, all of a sudden they all rushed to get them in. And there was like 10 out of the 16 in Kewaunee County that all rushed to get in. And then came down NR 151. And all of a sudden the effectiveness, when we were on the work groups, they said this is going to be for all farms of all sizes. And when it came down, they took it away from CAFOs. And in August or September, they put 151 in, and we looked at it and we said, well, wait a second, where is this in the permitting process? And they said, well, it will be adopted in their permits. Well, guess what? All of their permits had just been rushed through, and now they are coming due again in 2023. Okay, so this is the year that this should theoretically be adopted. The other thing, and I thank John for writing the notes here, the other thing I want to say about community is that it doesn't happen with just CAFOs, because just this past month in Lincoln Township, we had a non-CAFO, which will soon become a CAFO, that they had manure leave their field. They were cited. They were told to take care of the situation. They came out, they put some sand in. The next rain, it washed the sand away. They came back out, they put an earthen dam in. Guess what? The next rain, it came and washed the earthen dam away. The DNR was called out again this week, and I called the DNR as I drove past and saw the earthen dam still washed away. And he said, you know what he told me? He said, I'm not going to repair it. And the DNR guy said, you do know that that's a risk, that if I find manure has left that field, that you will be in violation. Oh, no manure left the field. The field has been being winter spread because they're a non-CAFO. They can spread, and theoretically it's got greater than 20 feet to bedrock on that. They've been spreading on that field all winter. Okay. You know, what are the odds that there's not going to be manure in that runoff? But he's willing to take that because he knows that the fine for doing that is going to be less than what it would cost to have to worry about what else to do with his manure. So it does happen in non-CAFOs, but they'll make them a CAFO. Of impact to community. Okay. Our roads are crap. Okay. Because of the oversized implements of husbandry that is going across roads that were built in the 40s and 50s and 60s for grandma and grandpa's tractor. Okay, not for these large multi-axle, huge behemoths that are going up and down the road. Okay, we cannot raise enough tax money at the town level to be able to fix those roads. Farm consolidation is happening. In our community, a large farm will go, they'll buy up the farm, the 40, 80, 120, 160 acre farm. They level the farmhouse. Now we have no residential tax base. Now it's all agricultural tax base at a much reduced rate. Okay. 1/2 a mile of road repair in Lincoln Township is $125,000. Our entire budget last year for road repair in Lincoln Township was $80,000. Okay, this is happening on every one of your township levels. This is why you need to get into this. This is why you need to get on your town boards. This is what's happening to community. Okay, we are losing our communities. And that is what I believe is a worst disgrace of all. John moved up here for the fish and wildlife. I moved up here because of the community that I grew up in, which is gone.
So this plays into actually this question that came across. So are they spreading manure in towns where there is an ordinance against it?
There are very few towns that have ordinances against spreading, and generally it's liquid manure. I know that the city of Algoma has a ordinance against it inside city limits. I don't think that. Yeah. Yeah. But the comment was in Liberty Grove, there may be a ordinance that they has to be generated inside the town of Liberty Grove, and I'm not sure that I don't live there, but that, but most towns have no ordinances, and it's very difficult to enforce those ordinance, especially with town budgets. Just like we're saying, most towns don't have the money to go out and enforce those types of ordinances. That's
And the comment that just build on that one, someone said, well, apparently the counties have to enact ordinances. So there needs to be something done countywide is what this person said online.
And towns could create ordinances similar to if the Liberty Grove is that it has to be generated within the county and stays in the county. Like right now, Kewaunee County sends a lot of manure to Door County. You could put in an ordinance that it has to be generated in Door County. That is something you have to do. But again, your county board has to be willing to do that and to spend the time and money, probably legally, to make sure that it's written proper so that it's enforceable. There are places where, nationally where you can find ordinance similar to that. You'd have to do some research on it. Again, having the courage at the county level is where it starts at, and again, that comes with who are you going to put on those boards? If you're up in Ashland County and Bayfield County, they have very stringent ordinances up there that could be followed. And that's something that you could use as well. Town of Ledgeview over in Brown County, they've done the same thing. They've put in place ordinances that are very restrictive and make the operators prove that they can do it in a safe manner. So that's where you have to start at your town board. And get those people on there that got the courage to actually put those ordinances in place.
And related to that statement, it's my understanding we have, I think, 17 municipalities in Door County. Some are villages, some are towns. And I think about 11 or 12 of those defer to the county land use services and ordinances. Some are villages and they have their own plan commission and their own ordinances and things. And there are 2 or 3 that have no really zoning ordinances, so to speak. And there has been some discussion that perhaps it would be great if we had a county-wide zoning ordinance system that all municipalities participated in, and would make that much easier to get it county-wide rather than hodgepodge along the way.
You know, we've been talking about this issue since before 2005. Okay, it goes back that far that we've been talking about manure. And we're going to talk about it as long as it takes. But here's a thought. We have a DNR that we've been talking to since 2005 or longer. We have an EPA that we've been in front of as many times as we can go. We've got a natural resource board that we've been down and almost kicked out of for telling the truth. You have your local elected officials, all and more. And we're still sitting here talking about what we have with liquid manure. I'm convinced, unlike John, that farmers have known exactly what they've been doing and why they're doing it before I got here. And they're continuing that practice. It is, and maybe the hardest decision that somebody's going to have to make. There may only be one way to stop them. And that's to stop renting your land for their shit. It's that simple. You take away their land for distribution and they're out of business, guys. Do it for 2 years and they're gone. Unless you think you can convince the EPA, the DNR, and DATCAP to make the major changes. And I don't think you have enough money because the Dairy Business Association does. There isn't a governor in the state, or our governor does not want the Dairyland state taken off the license plate. This is about money and it's about big money, but they can't make you rent your land for their shit. So stop it. You stop that and we won't have this meeting. Thanks.
Could you introduce yourself, actually? Someone online. Dick.
Oh,
Well-
I'm Dick Swanson. I live in Algoma and I've moved here about 9-10 years ago from Colorado. And I knew a little bit about manure coming from Colorado, but nothing like what happened here. Nothing. It's unbelievable. So take away the land, guys, and you'll win. You'll win.
So one last online question. Has there ever been, or could there be, a class action suit against the CAFOs for the manure spreading?
Karen Erbach Lawlor was on television last night. That's why we love that.
There probably could be. Unfortunately, we still need a lot more science. We've done a lot of science, but for that type of suit, you're going to have to, from what I've understood, is you have to prove a direct connection, and either for health reasons or a direct connection as to where that manure is coming from. The Wisconsin DNR could do that with DNA sampling. They choose not to. And private citizens can't get onto those lands. You'd have to get to the manure pit, plus to have the land where it was spread at and what's in the well. That's a government type of thing that needs to be done, because private citizens can't trespass onto CAFO's land to get those samples that are required. I believe at some point in time that could take place. I think it's coming. There is far too much evidence as to what is taking place, not only in Kewaunee County, but all across the country. That, in Yakima Valley, there was, which is out in Oregon or Washington, Yakima Valley, Washington, there was a RCRA suit that forced the CAFOs out there to provide drinking water to the citizens and to change their practices. Not that it fixed it, but I think that is something that may take place. We are on karst, which makes it a little bit more difficult just because of that fractured bedrock. But I think it's coming. The citizens, young people. I do a lot of farmers markets. I'm a farmer, I do a lot of farmers markets in the past when they actually had them. That young mothers and grandmas are driving forces in our food. They demand clean food. They're the ones that drive what is taking place in agriculture. The corporations might like to think that they do, but as grandmas and young mothers decide that they're not going to purchase those products, that's making the change. And their purchasing is saying, we want to have agriculture, especially animal agriculture, done appropriately. It's needs to be done with animal welfare in mind and human health in mind. And CAFOs don't fit any of those scenarios. So I think it's going to come, and those people are going to be the ones that are going to drive this. And I think in Central Sands, that was in the movie, there was a court case that was brought about by a young mother that had a miscarriage, and it was directly attributed back to nitrate poisoning from Central Sands Dairy. There is going to be a reckoning for what is going on. This group that sits here, if the CAFOs had listened to us 15 years ago, instead of fighting us 15 years ago, we wouldn't be sitting here today. We're talking about compost. We told them to change the compost 15 years ago. If they actually did cover crops, like true cover crops that we told them to do 15 years ago, we'd have soil health. If they would have broken down those huge mega farms into smaller farms, like we told them 15 years ago, put all of those workers that they have out on their own farms, they could still be big. They just have to be renting it to these other people. If we had smaller farmers, like we said 15 years ago, we wouldn't be having this meeting, and they wouldn't be in the trouble that they are today. They wouldn't have spent millions and millions of dollars in the Supreme Court and have to do what's taking place now. We have agricultural backgrounds. We told them how to fix their problems. They chose not to. They chose to be a CAFO. They chose to continue to poison their neighbors when we told them, we have a solution for you on how not to do that. They chose to ignore the people and demonize the people to make it that we were the problem and that we didn't believe in agriculture, even though most of us were farming. Today, we could have fixed probably 90% of this problem by following what the citizens and small farmers told them that they could have done to change their system. They chose not to. We could change it today if they listen. They actually have to be. John talked about that we need to build bridges. For 15 years or more, they have chosen not to build a bridge. They have chosen not to listen. They chose not to be part of the community. We still are more than willing to meet with them and teach them how to do this properly. It's easy to do. We have a lot of history. There's a lot of people out there that have done it in the past, and they're still doing it today at large scale. That's.
I just want to say something first, John. We have, there are real farmers out there that are stewards of the land, that work in concert with nature instead of against it, to like Lynn and Nancy do on their farm, to understand that soil biology is critical to growing nutritious plants, not just high yields, but actually plants with nutrition in them for healthy people and healthy animals. And that in order to have healthy soil biology, you got to quit putting the
glyphosate and the chemical fertilizers and the liquid shit and tilling the fields and all the things that destroy soil biology. And then when you get on top of the soil, you need to work with the rest of nature, like John was talking about, to have the insect populations out there, everything that depends upon the insects for the bats and the birds and all the other critters, so you can have a healthy, natural environment. That's what it's all about. And that's the thing that I think we need to be challenging the CAFOs and folks. You know, they talk about a cover crop, planting another monoculture on top of a monoculture that does nothing for the root systems for all the soil biology is not going to improve things. You know, if you look at Lynn and Nancy's pastures, you're going to see 100 different varieties of grasses and legumes and broadleafs out there. And that's what you need for a soil system that's going to support the good biology, that's going to give you healthy plants so you can have healthy animals. And you go out in the meadow and you see the birds and the bugs and everything else and the butterflies. It's awesome. And that's what we need to be challenging these farms to be doing.
Okay, yeah, I like to say something. I'm going to say this, and hello?
Put it right in the fur.
Yeah. I have the opportunity to work with most of these people in the last many years, and I'm Robert Sayers from Forestville, Southern Door, and as I assume that most of you are Door residents, and I just like to point out that Southern Door has, and not only Southern Door, it's further away than just Southern Door, has the same karst topography as Kewaunee County. And it starts probably April 15 again, we have seen when the spreading season starts, tanker trucks, and they are about 5,500 gallons, close to 6,000 gallons each truck, and they arrive at sometimes one at a clip at one a minute. Now, if you take quickly, and you don't need to take your cell phone out, you don't need the calculations to see if this even happens half a day at that rate, and sometimes they drive you almost off the road. We're talking about 1 million gallons, over 1 million gallons a day that spread around there. And the other thing, what might be not known to a lot of Door County residents, is we have in Door County only one CAFO in Southern Door, right at the headwaters of the Anape River. Old Elm Street, you can see it there, and on H as well. So compared with the number of CAFOs in Kewaunee County, that is low. On the other hand, and I still try to get numbers from the other CAFOs in Kewaunee County. To give you an idea, Kinnard, which was recently in the news as Friday, as far as the permit, Kinnard has almost half of the acreage rented in Southern Door. We're talking here close to 8,000 acres. So if you add up, and I don't have unfortunately the numbers yet, the other CAFOs, then you can see the problem, our concern in Southern Door, happening the same with our drinking water. And we get very little support from the county side. However, on a higher level, the problem is apparently recognized. Some of you might have read about it. Last year in January, there was, some of you might have seen it, a helicopter going over big part, certainly Southern Door, big part of county, with kind of, I call it a trampoline below it. And what they do, that is an airborne electromagnetic way of surveying the ground, try to get a grid of how much coverage there is of soil above the bedrock. And so that's now more than a year ago. It's not available. They're still working on the details. So that will be very interesting. But what I'm saying here, so it is recognized on a state level. And this was the dead cap and US Geological Service, who basically commissioned that survey, actually, interestingly, by a Canadian company. And so we're very interested to see what's coming out of there, because the preliminary maps, I looked at it, and they are close to the Kewaunee door border. You're looking at coverage at 5 feet in many areas or less. So no, I don't need to explain, that's a big concern for us, you know, with the spreading going on. All right, thank you.
If I'm an optimist, and one of the questions here was, where do we go from here? What can we do? And we've talked a lot about those. One of the things that used to happen in Kewaunee County, and was actually the result of the efforts of one person who started it, and then about 5 adults, was a well study program that was taught in the elementary schools. And these were just local citizens working with the school, the elementary schools in Kewaunee County, going from school to school and organizing a project to survey wells. They were primarily looking for abandoned wells, which is a huge issue, because every time a farm comes down, there's a well there. But where did it go? And if there's an open pipe that goes down to the water table, which there probably is, then that's a way not just to get water up, but also to send pollutants down instantly. But if you want to do something, then get together with a science teacher or 2 or 3 and talk to them about a program to teach kids about this. Now, does that mean that we have to wait 18 years or 6 years or 12 years for something to change? No, because what kids do is they go home and they ask their parents, how deep is our well? When did we last test our well? Oh, we've never done that. Well, could we test our well? My teacher tells me that they have this county program that gives money for people to test their wells, you know, if you don't have the money to do it yourself. And then the kid comes back with the report. And it educates the community. I mean, the kids can be real provocateurs, if you will, to help make a change. The second suggestion is everyone who leaves this room today can contribute to understanding what's going on in Door and Kewaunee County. As you drive home, look at the fields. Are any of those fields starting to green up? Or are they just dirt? If they're just dirt, the farmer is not following what are called regenerative agricultural practices. Regenerative agriculture is the latest buzzword in agriculture. Ironically, I met a farmer about 4 weeks ago in Stevens Point who had been doing it in South Dakota for 42 years. It's not new, but what it does is it encourages the farmers to do a number of things, one of which is to plant a multi-species cover crop, not a single species, not just winter wheat, but a multi-species cover crop, which does a world of good to improving the soil. And when the soil is improved and alive and has a root structure in it, guess what happens to the nutrients that get spread on it? They get captured. They don't go down. The field doesn't run mud off into the Anapee River. So as things when your lawn starts to green up, which actually is usually before the farm fields, start looking around and see whether the fields are greening up. And if there's a field that's not greening up, that's a farmer you ought to talk to. Did you plant a cover crop last fall? Was it multi-species? You know, that would improve your soil and it would improve the productivity of your land. It would protect it from washouts. And when we have these huge rains that we're having because of climate change, or I'm sorry, what's the proper term for it these days? Climate change. I'm not up on that stuff. I stopped watching TV about a year ago. But anyway, so two things. Get with a science teacher and organize an education program at the elementary level, or maybe junior high, but by that time, maybe they're not so interested. Elementary school, I think they will be. What's going on in their wells? And the other thing is when things start to green, look to see if the fields are green. And if the fields aren't green, they're not practicing regenerative agriculture. And you can be sure that whatever they're putting on the surface is ending up in your drinking water. So, thank you.
Up close to 5 o'clock. I think maybe now is a pretty appropriate time. Everybody's been here for a couple of hours. And so what I'd like to do is to thank, I don't know, this informal panel, I guess it became speakers, John, Jody, Tom, Keith, yeah, Nancy, Lynn, and Dick. Thank you very much for all the information provided for all of us. We greatly appreciate it. And all those who showed up today and the questions that you asked and the folks that are online, I think some of them are still there. We really appreciate it. We'll have another program next month. We haven't planned it out yet, but it's coming. And we have a table in the back with some information. If there's anything you'd like, just take it with you. And thanks for coming out and drive carefully. Thank you very much. Thank you.